if you're choosing to formula feed, then you should learn safe formula handling, guidance, and how to prep bottles. You should leave a class feeling empowered to, execute on the decisions that you've made.
Hey everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Entering Motherhood, a podcast dedicated specifically to new moms going through this amazing journey in life. I'm your host, Sarah Bilger, a postpartum nutritional coach / mechanical engineer. And as always, I'm so excited to be here with you and share all of the information I've been lucky enough to obtain since becoming a mom. In this episode, we talk with Jessica, the founder of the Parent Collective, about how she helps moms find community and learn about childbirth and postpartum in a judgment-free environment. Hello and welcome to Entering Motherhood. I'm so happy to have you here and really just jump into this conversation. So if you would like, go ahead and introduce yourself for our listeners.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. This is so exciting. My name is Jessica. I am the founder of the Parent Collective, which is an started as an evidence-based prenatal class series designed to help couples find a support network through the lens, or through this, using prenatal education as the sort of sticky stuff to help them connect. We have been in existence for 6 years now, and have expanded to offer new mom groups over Zoom, and coaching for moms who may be struggling with the transition into motherhood. And I think it's important to just say why I started the Parent Collective. I had both of my boys. I'm a mother of two. I had both of my boys in England, and I was, living an expat life and didn't sort of have ties into the community really, and was really apprehensive about having kids without much of a support network locally. And one of my friends told me that I needed to sign up for a class called the NCT, which stands for the National Childbirth Trust. And she said, that's where you're going to make your mommy friends. And so I dragged my husband along and sort of said, we're here to make friends, play nice. And we went to this class. And the beauty of the NCT is that it sorts all of its participants by their neighborhood and their due date. So everybody in your class lives local to you and is due within a month or so of you. And they really make an effort to kind of get discussion going and get the group meeting outside of class. And so I left this class, and my husband left this class with this amazing network that saw us through. I mean, my maternity leave was spent mostly in someone's living room breastfeeding and, whinging about the day's struggles, and some of my best friends to this day, I mean, my eldest is 12, are still some of my best friends. And so I came back to the States when my youngest was 2, and would ask friends, with no intention of starting a business, but just asking what their experience was like, because I knew it was different here from the UK. And the vast majority of my friends said that they felt really isolated, they were lonely, some of them even said that they were sort of they felt shame because they were secretly excited to go back to work, because they just sort of felt lost, at home. And almost everybody told me that they didn't find their mom friends until their kids started preschool. And I just thought, what a missed opportunity that is for connection, because when you're expecting, we're all so excited and nervous about this next stage, and so you're so open to meeting people who are in that same boat as you. And I think once you've had your baby, there are a lot of sort of things that could impede your ability to connect, whether it's that you're exhausted and you don't feel like yourself, right? You feel sort of like, I felt like I couldn't think in complete sentences for months after I had my first, because I was so delirious. Or maybe you're struggling with feeding, or maybe you're worried you're going to be judged because you're not, you feel insecure about parenting, whatever it is. There are these barriers to being real with people after you've had your baby. But if you've met those people before your baby arrives, then you can just let it all hang out and be like, you know me in my pre-baby state, and so I can be real and say, gosh, this is hard, or, I'm, you know, I, I'm losing my mind. My husband, sleeps through, the baby crying in the middle of the night, and I have murderous thoughts. These sort of, you can just be real in a way that maybe you couldn't in a new moms group, if that makes sense. So that's why I started Collective, in short.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think, it's very true that, it is hard to find those mom friends. And sometimes when you ask like other people, like, how did you find your mom friends, or, like things like that, it is not until, your child's in school or something that like confines them to like that specific age that you're really kind of connecting with people that are on the same level as you. Because I think there is such a unique time frame that happens in that early motherhood stage that you just kind of disattach from unless you're in it at that moment. And I think it's just kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it, but like you said, like putting you in not only like the neighborhood but just close to the due date. You're having people that are going through like those same like emotions leading up to like all throughout pregnancy, leading up to delivery, and then like those early months of just, like you said, like sleep deprived, like struggling with something, or just like in absolute complete bliss of like, wow, this baby's like so beautiful and wonderful. Like they haven't had any tantrums yet or haven't said the word no. So, like you're kind of just still in this like sweet spot in this little bubble of time. And I think, like when we're not able to find that, or sometimes there is, like I did like a prenatal yoga, like stuff like that, or like a birthing class, like unless you're going somewhere specifically geared towards one general topic, I would say you're not finding those groups that are, it could be any mom from anywhere, but the only thing in common you have is the age of your child.
Yeah. And I do think there is something special, like you were saying, that happens when you have somebody that's on that ride with you in that moment. I have one of my dear friends had a baby later than me, right? So she had a baby when my kids were, 7, and she would call me, and she would be, full of anxiety about whether it was a sleep regression or a growth spurt, and just the struggles around breastfeeding during a growth spurt. And I logically and intellectually knew that, but I wasn't in the emotional, like the immediacy of that feeling wasn't there for me at that moment. It was 7 years earlier, but having somebody that really viscerally reacts to those struggles in it is so helpful. I mean, it's different, and once you're out of it, like you said, you're on to the next thing. I'm now, dealing with screen time and struggling with putting limits around screen time or homework, and so you sort of drop all of the previous knowledge that you had around, nap schedules to make room for these new phases that you enter. So the parent collective classes are the same structure as these NCT classes were that I had taken. So everybody is due around the same time and lives in the same area. The only caveat is that we have Zoom prenatal classes now, so that people are from all over, but they're all due at the same time. So you can build like a virtual community, even if it's not close by. So
That's amazing. And you said you've been doing this for 6 years?
yeah, so it started out really small and slow because, you know, as a small business owner who is up against hospital classes or doctor's practice classes, it took a really like long time to get word of mouth going and to get critical mass in the classes so that people really did get that intended community. And I feel like in the past 2 years, we've kind of really hit our stride. And we're, able to kind of offer other, workshops and first aid and CPR and things like that, just to sort of help educate and support new parents on the journey.
So, do you have mothers coming in who are pregnant, or is it postpartum period, a mix of both?
It's a mix of both, but primarily we're known for our prenatal series. So, you know, expectant moms usually reach out to us in their late, early second trimester to kind of learn more. And we advise them to take our series late second, early third trimester. And the series consists of, it covers labor and delivery and late pregnancy, labor and delivery. And then the second class is pain management, relaxation, and C-sections. The third class is breast and bottle feeding, and the fourth class is new baby care. And I very consciously created the classes to be agenda free. So they're very, you bring to the table what, your hopes and dreams are for your delivery and your, raising your baby. And if that is a planned C-section and formula feeding, we have the information for you so that you feel supported. And if it's that you want a natural childbirth, and so one thing I didn't like about the National Childbirth Trust classes was that they were very agenda driven and very judgmental. I just didn't want to um, traumatize anybody, and I don't think it's anybody else's place to tell a woman or a couple how they should deliver or raise their child. So, and then I obviously don't have a medical background, so all of the teachers for our classes are labor and delivery nurses or certified nurse midwives. So, we made a conscious choice to have somebody teaching that was familiar with what's happening in hospitals and the policies and how procedures tend to go, so that you can get an accurate picture if you're having a hospital delivery of what that might look like.
That's awesome. That's really amazing. And like you said, I think, there is kind of how I was saying before, sometimes when you pick a class, it is very specifically driven towards like one way or another. There isn't that like broad free range of whatever you choose is right to you and for your plan. And I think, it's fine to like advocate towards a certain way or feel a certain way, like how you want to deliver or how you want to feed your baby and whatnot. But like you said, like putting that kind of label on like this is how you need to mother. I think like nobody needs that. Nobody needs that like extra extended pressure. And like I said, like educating them is one thing, but like and like informing them on all the different options are fine, but like whatever they choose, I do believe like that is the mother's choice, that is the parent's choice, like that is the way that they want to have their child. And I don't feel like we need to be pigeonholing people into like, because that does lead to, I think, like all the shame and the guilt and everything that comes afterwards.
And they should be entitled to be informed parents in the choices that they're making. I mean, if you're choosing to formula feed, then you should learn safe formula handling, guidance, and how to prep bottles. You should leave a class feeling empowered to execute on the decisions that you've made, not feel, like you said, shame that you've made the wrong choice in somebody else's eyes. And who is that person to tell you?
Yeah. And then what are your thoughts, like thinking about everything in advance? Like, I believe a lot of the times we focus so much on the birth and we don't really dig into that postpartum period. And that is something that I really strive to pull up and dig into more and really kind of shed light on, because it's more than just the birth. It's everything that comes after it too. Like the birth is how your child comes into this world, but everything after that is a whole new journey. And so, what do you advise new parents, or what do you think is important to focus on when thinking in advance?
Sure. So I completely agree. My husband used to always say, having a baby is a marathon, not a sprint. And when I would get sort of, do and just be sort of manic, because, you can find yourself being a little manic in those early days, he would say, you're going to burn yourself out. And we're week 2. Like, there's 18 years. You need to, pace yourself and just be kind to yourself. Like, it'll get done eventually. We don't need everything to get done now. So that, just having some grace for yourself in those early weeks and months, I think, is so important. But I mean, one thing that I do, as you probably have gathered, I think that it is really important to try and seek out friends that can kind of go on this ride with you. Whether it's even finding a supportive Facebook group that is a place that you can ask questions. There's one near me called Balanced Mama, and women go on there. It's really a judgment-free space, and they can ask the questions that they're looping out about, right? Because I remember when my son was going through a growth spurt, and I didn't know what was happening. He was feeding every 20 minutes, and I was freaking out. And it was, I could feel myself kind of spiraling. And I wrote to my friends that were in this class, and I said, oh my God, I think my milk supply is drying up. I'm sure that, this is the end of my breastfeeding journey. I'm so stressed, and he's so stressed. And within a couple minutes, one of my friends wrote back and said, oh, that happened to me last week. It's just him preparing you, for a growth spurt, and it just to increase your milk supply. It's totally fine. And just like that, right? That cloud lifted, and it was like, oh, okay, so I can get through this. It's just a day and it'll be behind me. But if you don't have those people to reach out to, you'll be in your head. And I really think finding people that you can lean on in those early weeks and months is important. I would also say that lining up, even if you don't know if you're going to need them or not, lining up and just having done a little bit of research for supports, whether they be an IBCLC if you're breastfeeding, just, or a lactation counselor, somebody that if you're struggling, you have a name that you can call, um, postpartum doulas, sleep consultants, just having a list of resources of people that if you find you're struggling in any way, you don't then need to start your research, but you have people at the ready. Because what I hear from lactation consultants time and time again is that people wait until they're at their wits' end to call them. And, it makes it much harder to solve any problems. Whereas if you reach out as soon as you feel like something's not right, or, I'm struggling, then you can get yourself sort of redirected on the right path. And it's just a much easier journey for you. So I think it's really worthwhile to just take a little time to crowdsource and find some supports that you may or may not need, but it's just good to have them in your back pocket if and when the moment arises. Did you use any supports when your daughter was born?
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly like how you were saying, I think it's important to be more proactive than reactive when it comes to the postpartum period, because in those moments, sometimes it can really just feel like, oh my gosh, this is the end. Like, it's all downhill from here. Like, it's very kind of like overwhelming, overreacting. Like, you just feel like there's just too much going on, and now this, and where do I go? And like, you don't have the time to, or the headspace. You don't have that headspace to really be searching for those people. You don't have a calm moment to sit in front of your computer and do a little bit of like a Google search, if you will, like to find this person or that person and things like that. I think it's just very much like, it could even just be like 2 a.m. and now you're like, oh my gosh, like, why is my baby crying, or what's going on with my milk supply, things like that. And for me, I went into it thinking like, I'm going to breastfeed. This is going to be the easiest thing in the world. Like, all I have to do is just put the baby on your boob, and it will just flow and everything will be okay. And I mean, mind you, like, our breastfeeding journey was like, I guess, like average as far as like successfulness and stuff, but like I was still kind of, am I doing this right? Is she eating enough? What's going on? Like she would fall asleep at the breast all the time, like constantly. So I was like, is this normal? Like, why is she falling asleep? What's going on? And my pediatrician actually had suggested a breastfeeding support group that was in the basement of a church that was local to us. And I had gone there when I was on maternity leave just to kind of like, you get to watch other moms feed, you get to see like how they're doing. They had lactation consultants there that were able to, give you pointers or tips or tell you these things. So it was kind of suggested. I mean, she was born in August, she just had her second birthday. And it was suggested just to, strip her down to just a diaper and tickle her toes to wake her up. And I mean, that worked, it helped. And once she was a little bit older, she would stay awake longer and feed longer and things like that. But, I was just clueless to how intensive breastfeeding was going to be. And, like they say, like, oh, feed them every 2 hours, but she would latch on and maybe feed for 45 minutes or an hour, like even if it was just like subtle sucking and stuff like that. So I didn't want to stop her. But by the time, that hour is complete, then you really only have about like maybe 40 minutes to an hour to like do whatever you want to do while still like tending to them before, oh, it's 2 hours now, so it was like a constant upkeep that you don't really realize until you're there in that moment yourself. And it's different for every baby, every mom, like every situation.
Yeah, so knowledge is power, right? And just having that resource, should you have any questions or, it's empowering, right? You have a solution to the problem should the problem arise. So I think that's useful. Um, the other thing that I would say that I think is so important and like almost universally overlooked is to really have a lot of conversations with your partner before your baby arrives. I mean, whether those conversations are about your hopes and expectations for what pregnancy and those early months are going to look like, whether it's talking openly about, these are things that I need to feel human, and I need you to help me prioritize them, whether it's, I need to exercise and I need you to help me with the baby so that I can exercise, or, whatever that looks like, just having an open conversation about what those weeks and months are going to look like. Because once the baby arrives, those conversations very quickly feel charged, right? Charged with emotion, with judgment, with, and can quickly sort of spiral into arguments like, you're not pulling your weight, that's the undertone can very quickly feel like a judgment. And so I think being really open and maybe having a conversations about, who's going to do what, who's going to do the dream feed. I mean, I was very clear with my husband that I am borderline crazy without sleep. Like, and that was the thing that I was most anxious about, was my emotional well-being because of the sleep deprivation. And so he took on the dream feed. Like, I would pump and he would feed our son with a bottle in the middle of the night. And just knowing that that had been established, right? That it didn't need to be who's getting up, who's going to be punched, in the middle of the night when the baby cries. And don't get me wrong, we still had plenty of those whisper fights, but I think just having that established before your baby comes is hugely, hugely helpful. And building on from that, I think even in the most kind of equal households, or, most evolved households, when a baby comes, a lot of the sort of work around a baby and the household work ends up falling to the mother because they're home on maternity leave. It just sort of, you sort of wake up one day and go, oh, what happened, And I think having conversations about that, about who's going to do what around the house before the baby comes, again, before it's charged with that emotion from everybody being tired and irritable, is also really helpful. There's a book that I'm totally obsessed with called Fair Play. Have you heard of this book by Eve
No.
Rodsky? So Eve Rodsky wrote this book called Fair Play, which is all about helping families sort of share the load in the household. And just, we always hear about, the invisible work and the emotional labor and all of these things that moms largely fall to moms. And being mindful of that and thinking about kind of what buckets of work can your partner be doing on a regular basis, and establishing that before the baby comes so that you can kind of start as you mean to go on, I think is so valuable. So
Yeah. A lot of the times, like if you are breastfeeding, maybe your partner or even yourself, you're like, well, what else is there to do? And it's kind of like I was saying, like if you're breastfeeding, you're sometimes confined to the same location for an extended period of time, and you need to eat also. You need to be like making sure that you're drinking water and getting like the proper nutrients and everything that you need. Like maybe you just need like something to entertain you or help pass the time. Like of course you want to just stare at your baby all day, but like that sometimes can only go so far, and you really kind of get stir crazy. And so sometimes I think it's like our partners will kind of be like, well, what's my job? Like what am I supposed to do? Like they feel like if I can't feed the baby and all it's doing is eating, sleeping, and pooping, like what am I supposed to do? Like what are they just supposed to like change all the diapers and you do all the feedings? And it's like there's so much more that goes into it. And I think having that conversation and really getting down like some sort of process, or at least like you said, just starting the conversation of how do you think it's going to go? What do you think it's going to look like? What are we going to do if this comes up? Or how are we going to do this? I think that's so important. And again, something that's so overlooked. And all the baby books that you read or the classes that you take, like, sometimes you think like, oh, I've read enough of the book, or like I dug into this enough. And it's not until the very end that that postpartum information and period comes in, and you're like, oh, I'll worry about that later. But when you're in it, you're not able to process sometimes like what's going to go on and what's going to happen. And, right now we're preparing for our second, and I feel like I at least have a little bit of a better understanding of what it's going to kind of look like. But again, like every baby's different, every birth is different, every scenario is different. But going into it knowing that like, okay, we've had our conversations, we've had like our topics of like how this is going to go and whatnot, and also understanding that however it does go is going to be okay. you know
but you're a team, right? And that's the and those conversations are in service to being the most functional, most supportive team that you can be, right? Like if you're breastfeeding and doing that, for however many, I mean, there's all those statistics about how it's more than a full-time job when you're breastfeeding. Maybe the conversation is, okay, can you just be, you're the laundry guy. You are in charge of laundry. I'm never going to think about laundry. That is your domain. Or, you're the dishes guy. Like I'm never going to think about dishes. That's not, and then it not only does it free up from tasks, but it also just frees you up mentally with your checklist in your head, right? Of the endless things that need doing. So I think that's, and the last thing I'll say, because on this topic of just preparing for what's coming, is that if there are any things that you can automate or streamline in advance, like putting diapers on a subscription so that you don't ever have to go, oh my God, we're out of diapers, or, pet food, or just things that are staples that you can just know are kind of being delivered and you don't have to think about them. Or maybe, a meal service thing so that it removes the kind of endless slog of thinking about meals. I can't. I that's the bane of my existence, thinking about meals for a 10 and 12-year-old boy, where no matter what I make, somebody is giving me feedback. It drives me crazy. So, thinking, just coming up with, little ways that you can kind of remove something from your plate. I think that those can go a long way, just because those are the kinds of, there's nothing more annoying than discovering in the middle of the night that you're out of diapers. And I remember when my husband, in the UK, nothing's open 24 hours. So he was standing out in front of our local pharmacy like 45 minutes before it opened, because he didn't know when it opened. And he's just standing out there like, we're wrapping our baby in towels. We need diapers, So just knowing that that's kind of, set it and forget it.
Yeah. And that's another thing too. Like, I was recently talking to a friend, and her sister had been struggling with breastfeeding, and it was maybe 2 in the morning, and she was just like, oh my gosh, like my baby needs to be fed. Like this is just gotten too far. And like, we can still work on breastfeeding and stuff, but at this moment, like, my baby needs to be fed. And they did not prepare for what happens if breastfeeding doesn't work out, or what do we do if the milk isn't coming in, or things like that. And so there was no formula in the house, and she had sent her husband out to go get some formula, and nowhere was open. Nowhere had formula. So they had to wait until the morning, like, for somewhere to open. And it is stressful. And especially, like I said, like, your baby just wants to be fed, and like, you can hear their cries, and you're trying so hard. But like, sometimes it's just like, you have to keep that can of like formula like just somewhere, or like, make sure that your supply is good, because I had a hard time at nights. That's when my milk was always the lowest. And so, like, if you're maybe like pumping during the day, like, just keeping that like extra supply, to have in the middle of the night feedings, because you might sort of slow down at that period, and then it all of a sudden comes back in the morning, but like, your baby is still like struggling in those moments. So I think just kind of like putting like some of those expectations aside, and understanding that we can't plan everything out, and that we can't predict everything that's going to happen, and setting up those things to be a little bit more proactive, I think can alleviate the stress off of new moms.
Totally. Yeah. And having that break glass in case of emergency formula, it's just like you said, like, it's not giving, it's not defeatist. It's just, that's such an emotional, like, that I was just catapulted back to that feeling of when your baby is crying and you know what they need, but you can't give it to them. And it's such a helpless feeling. So just having the just in case is, I think, mind for sure.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to add, or any like final piece of, advice, or things that you've learned, or specific things that have happened in your early motherhood days that you'd like to give the listeners?
I mean, I think that um the lessons that I've learned in those early months, my husband and I used to say, you can get through anything if you can get through the first 6 months of having a baby, because it's so by the skin of your teeth, right? You are everyone's in survival mode a little bit, right? And so just having, I think if you just have some effort to prepare some of these things in advance, then you'll just feel a little bit more in control. That said, and expect the unexpected time, right? And I think moms and dads just need to have a bit of a go with the flow attitude, and just have grace for themselves, that everything's just a phase. And you don't need to, like, I was very much the kind of person who wanted to accomplish everything, and I think I had to sort of settle into this idea of, I'll get to that in the next phase, right? Like, I just need to focus on feeding my baby and sleeping when I can. And I, and just you will come to a point where um you feel like you have more bandwidth. But initially, just be kind to yourself, I think. That would be my advice.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, for coming on and sharing your wisdom of motherhood and everything that you've been through and what you've started for other moms is amazing. So I'd really love to just hear, like where you're at on social media, how we can get in contact with you, everything like that.
Sure. So the website for the Parent Collective is just www.theparentcollective.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook at the Parent Collective TPC, so like the initials of the Parent Collective, one word. And then you can reach me on, by email at jessica@theparentcollective.com. And I, organize all of our classes, and then I'm coaching for moms. So if any moms wanted to reach out to learn more about that, they can just email me.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure, of course. Thank you.
Well, this wraps up yet another episode of Entering Motherhood. I hope that you have found this episode helpful, and if you liked it, please share it with others who might also benefit from this information. If there's anything that you'd like to know more about, or maybe you know someone who'd like to be on the show, please visit my website, enteringmotherhood.com. I'm so thrilled to be going on this journey with you and getting the amazing opportunity to help moms during this postpartum experience. You can also now find us on Instagram and Facebook at Entering Motherhood.